Hello and welcome to our second segment of the Red Petrel, talking about the Vagina Monologues. We are currently about to begin our interview with Lillian Norris, who performed in that monologue. Lily, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about it?
So my name is Lillian. The monologue I performed was, of course, my short skirt. The reason I originally did it was because I was working through some trauma, so I felt like this would be a great piece to perform, and it really was. I really enjoyed the entire piece. I enjoyed performing it. I want to be fair to this play, though I do enjoy the criticism. I think it's lovely and it's necessary because we have to acknowledge our own oppression of women in the movement, not only like cis women, but our trans women, everyone. So I think this is definitely very progressive. So I would like to start off with, I do want to be fair, so some things that I felt the play got right, and then I'll transition into some of the things that I felt it missed the mark on. So one, I'm a business major. I have some other business majors joining me, so I would really, really like to bring up the part that they talked a lot about statistics, about rape statistics, about the 1 billion women who have experienced sexual assault, the issues of rape culture. I know they talked a lot about the statistics in the service industries and in especially farming, calling it the field of panties. And I think it helps to actualize, like in my own head, saying, oh, it's 1 billion women. Well, like, shit, that's a lot. You know, when you just say a lot of women have experienced sexual assault, that's one thing. But when you can put a number on it, I feel like that's more helpful in terms of actually thinking about it. For me, I would say personally, this maybe not everyone's experience, but I did this piece as a form of empowerment, and I felt very empowered doing it. Now, this is not true with all the pieces, but my short skirt especially talks about how what we wear is not necessarily an excuse to be assaulted or to be looked down on. It very much, I felt I could relate to it on a lot of different notes. I appreciated that the play talked a lot about beauty standards with the piece Hair. It talked about a woman who her husband always wanted her to shave and how she felt super bad about it, how she didn't want it to, how society often asks us to remove our body hair and the societal implications of that. I also did enjoy that they put trigger warnings in the playbill for the audience, but on the backside of that, I definitely want to say one of the marks they missed was the issues with the psychological implications on the cast. I know a lot of my cast members had a lot of trouble reading the more triggering and problematic parts in the play. It was hard for them to get through. It was hard for them to even perform. I know a lot of different cast members had a lot of struggle when doing that, and because due to our director's kind of instruction, we were made to sit right by the stage. We could not move. We could not be on our cell phones. This was especially hard for me because the piece before mine, My Vagina, My Village, is extremely triggering. It was terrifying to listen to. I thought I was going to go into a panic attack almost every time I heard it, and I was given no safe space. I couldn't leave. And I'm all for supporting my other cast members, of course, but I just couldn't have anywhere to go, you know what I mean?
Just to kind of clarify for those at Oglethorpe or listening in, no counseling offered for you guys, nothing off stage, no way for someone who might be having trouble dealing with this to really be able to deal with it.
No, we were basically told, sit in the front, pillows, cool, slumber party type aesthetic, I guess. But we were told we could not leave during any performances. Didn't matter, triggered, not triggered, crying, not crying. We were not allowed to leave until the play was completely over, front to back. We were told to pee beforehand, obviously, so we didn't even get up to go to the bathroom, except during intermissions. Yep, I know, pretty ridiculous, right?
That seems really out there, and it kind of sounds like there were some casualties to this play. It almost seems like if anything, they almost wanted you guys to be upset up front, so that way there's this sort of atmosphere of people who are traumatized up front. It kind of puts it on the audience, like look at what's going on here, and it's like, I mean, that's great and all, but it's also very traumatizing for the people actually going through it. I mean,
I think the intention was originally that we support are women, are cast members, other members of the play. And I get that. I definitely do think that we need to support our fellow sisters and all of this, but I also feel like there was just too much going on, and who the hell wants to have a panic attack in front of a crowd, you know? Like,
of all the places you could have a panic attack, front and center would not be one. I know that going through the play, I think it's My Vagina, My Village is actually very, very difficult, even for the audience to get through as an audience member. I've seen the play twice now, and every time we hit that one, it is just like, it's like getting hit with a sledgehammer. Mm-hmm. Just immediately want to stand up, walk outside of the play, and just be done for the day. It is very difficult to get through, so I can't imagine how awful it would actually have to be to not only perform it just once, but several times in a row, day after day, with no way to just sort of get away from it. So I really think that must have been difficult. Obviously, the experience was half good, half bad in a way for you. You were able to work through some traumas that you had, but there were also some problematic parts to the play that we've just discussed. Is there anything that you would say about the play that could have just been done better or just should have been scrapped?
Right. So I definitely feel like pieces in the play that have been discussed in the first segment are definitely should not have been in the play. My Vagina, My Village definitely should not have been in the play. I understand the value of shock value, but at some level, there has to be somewhere you say, okay, this needs to stop. We can't put this on. I also feel like they definitely could have had probably more monologues that detailed like working women, definitely like working class, poor women, because that unites all of us through so many minority groups. Poverty is a huge one, and I felt it wasn't spoken on enough. I felt also there was only one sex worker monologue, and I mean, let's be honest, how else are you going to get through college? But I felt like that could probably have been more expanded on, made a little bit more modern, because I mean, sex work, it's
real work.
It's real work.
It's real work that lots of women, men, trans people have to do every day to get through and to have food to put on the plate and just live.
Right. Yeah. There's also the issue that it was very white feminist. I think that we have to talk about the misgivings of the movement. Like that has to be included when we're speaking about women empowerment, about how we have disenfranchised other women, because we can't fix the issue that we do not recognize.
To sort of leapfrog off of that, I know that so far our whole segment has been a little down in the dumps on the play. So is there anything that you felt that the play did well?
Yeah, besides the things I mentioned before, I really enjoyed the piece on birth. Actually, we had a woman there that did the American Sign Language for that entire piece. I really enjoyed that. I feel it's super inclusive. I liked how there was a piece that talked about ovarian cancer. That's definitely a huge thing with people who have vaginas. Ovarian cancer is a really big thing, and I definitely felt like it was very good. And I mean, there were a couple of things I got right. I do love the V-Day spotlights. I enjoy the charity aspect of it. I think that's probably the best part of it, is the fact that it is raising money for women's shelters, for different organizations that can help all sorts of women, especially impoverished women. I think that's probably the best thing that the monologue does. But I mean, completely, I think we have to think about it in totality of the implications of it, like who was it meant for and the cost of it. I mean, who do you think this was meant for as an audience member?
I had this discussion with a former roommate of mine, a member of SSC as well. Yeah. And we'd sort of discussed afterwards, he'd sort of implied to me, and I sort of felt a little bit of that too, is that there was definitely a feeling that at the end, the spotlight portion just really didn't seem like it was even about women. It really felt like they were talking to upper middle class and upper class white men. It felt like the whole play just got undercut in the talking about women part. Getting bogged down talking about dudes. You know, I feel like that's important, but it's not there. Joining us as well is Ash Levy, who is another member of the Red Petrel, and they have a point, so.
I think, especially the end, it was a lot about the Me Too movement. While that's a very important movement, right now we're not talking a lot about restaurant workers, or a lot of times the Me Too movement is presented as maybe Harvey Weinstein's victims or Larry Nassar's victims, who were all pretty much upper class women. I feel like the whole play was directed at that in general. It didn't address a lot of issues, and they were all presented, even it was addressing other issues, it was presented to a very upper middle class audience.
I will say they did address restaurant workers. In the end there, they addressed the fact that restaurant workers have to work for tips, the fact that service industry workers are often assaulted, like the panic buttons being installed on people to fight sexual assault in the hotel industry. I think they did do a good job trying at least to bring up some working class issues, but I do think, yes, I think that some of the end part there was very like shooting towards more class privilege than I would have liked.
So who did you think it was aimed at? I mean, you were actually in it, and Ash, you've got a different perspective than me, so where do you guys feel like this was sort of aimed at, or who was it aimed at, or what was it aimed at?
I would like to have it aimed at educating the masses. I mean, that's the entire point of the movement, is to educate ignorant masses on, and not ignorant like dumb, but like ignorant as you just don't know. And I would like for it to have been kind of a learning moment for everyone, but I felt instead it was more performative. I mean, especially we had tons and tons of trans and POC banners. If anyone saw like the back of our stage performance, it was almost all trans flags, trans ally, people of color. Like it was so much of that substance decorating a play that was not reflective of that same form. And so I felt it was very much like, oh, pat me on the back, I'm an ally, whereas it should have been like, we are in support of women, of all people who have vaginas, and not just women, of everyone.
Or maybe not even, not to kind of undermine the point, but especially at Oglethorpe, where we're a fairly diverse campus, instead of trying to create a play that is we're in support of, instead just be we are representative of these people. We do have this voice. And I really think that that's something that was left out. So, Ash, who did you think it was aimed at?
I think the posters kind of were a little bit interesting, especially considering all the issues that we've had. I've seen it at a different school and done a little bit differently with a lot more diverse of a cast, and they did not put up any of the posters. They had a much different feel to it, and the way that they presented, I think it was a little bit different, and I feel like that was more aimed at a broader audience, whereas Oglethorpe's trying to capitalize a lot on the current movements and trying to look at it from a very white, sort of modern third wave feminism, basically. Whereas I think the play, when I saw it at a different school, was a little bit more aimed at including everyone and talking a lot more about intersectionality than Oglethorpe. And it was kind of weird to see the play with such a white, for lack of a better term, cast, and then they had all these posters behind them and they also tried to capitalize on Rosie the Riveter, who is also a person of color, and had everyone dress up sort of in that fashion. So I think they were trying to capitalize on other symbols and try to take these symbols of bigger movements themselves and try to make it to their purposes.
I think a good metaphor of that is being at a protest versus seeing protests on Instagram is basically what that play was. We should have been there at the protest, but we were posting the protest on social media.
Sort of this virtue signaling side of any real big social movement, or any kind of movement really, is you have people who this really matters for because they're a part of it. Every worker at the workers' strike, they have a real reason why they're there, because it's their money, it's their pay, it's so on and so forth. There's always just a couple of people who just show up just to like take photos and be like, I'm here. And it's like, all right, thanks. You're not really helping anybody. And I feel like not everybody in the cast, but definitely the way that it was portrayed, it really capitalized on this idea of sort of, I'm a part of the movement too, and it's like, yeah,
and I think a lot of it was piggybacking on the backlash of the Trump era, and I'm kind of concerned that as soon as we get more of like a liberal Democrat into office, or even just a less egregious Republican, that a lot of their movement will die off and they won't be as interested in what they're doing. And I think that's a big problem, because a lot of this seemed to be directed, and they all became very active after Trump was elected, but they weren't very involved before he came to political fame.
I will say definitely there have been castmates. I remember I did not look at the play at all, I'll admit it, before we performed. So before opening night, we had a run through, and I remember specifically there being maybe not half the cast, but a good portion of the cast that once the whole play was run through, I don't think they might not have seen everything either, and we were definitely discussing the issues with the play, but that was the night before, so there's not much we could have done at that point. But I definitely think this reflection is super important. Another issue I think we should bring up is that mainly the directors and the spearheaders of the play suddenly have issues, and I believe even maybe a panel, and they are suddenly coming out and doing a complete 180 after certain criticisms that were brought up on social media. And I think this is very interesting, considering certain people in the play have been doing this for 4 years, ever since it's been pretty much put on at Oglethorpe, and now they are suddenly against the more harmful pieces of the play. So I'm wondering why that is.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a side of it where for maybe 2, 3 weeks where I saw a lot of posts about the Vagina Monologues on Facebook and other social media. It's kind of like when any big tragedy or anything happens, there's a lot of people who like that mobilizes them, they get out there and they really do something about it. And then there's a lot of people who post thoughts and prayers. And it's like, how many people actually really were questioning TVM already, and other people bringing it up made them feel confident enough to say, I also think that this is bad. I know from my own personal experience, I'm a white dude, so I had my own personal misgivings with the play, but I sort of felt like this isn't my space to have misgivings. There being a lot more criticism out there really made me think, oh wow, even the people who were like in the play thought that there were some problems with this. I definitely think there were people who only felt bad because they got caught or because somebody finally called them out, and I think that that's really unfortunate that that's how some of it has played out. But one of the questions I would really ask you, though, is not so much even about that, but like, do you feel like the play is still good? Should we keep doing it? Do we need to just reform it? Like, what needs to be the future of the Vagina Monologues? Or do we need to just approach it maybe as a timepiece that we just sort of go, this was something that used to be a part of the women's movement, but we do other things now that are more inclusive. What do you really think?
I believe that the Vagina Monologues has tried year and year again to kind of catch up to inclusivity, but it's not quite getting there no matter how hard it tries. I think honestly that we could do a lot better, even if not even considering like another play, but even just finding monologues from our students, really representing Oglethorpe, finding monologues from our community, really representing Atlanta, finding monologues from really influential people in the movement now, progressing now, rather than looking back to like the 90s and trying to play catch up in a race that is already so far ahead.
So with that, I know that there are a lot of other colleges that what they've started to do is they just have student monologues. Do you think that that's, like for Oglethorpe, do you think that might even be a viable alternative to this play, or do we need to maybe look even further than that? I know I went to Night of the Arts a little bit ago, and there were lots of people who went up to the front, maybe even inspired by TVM, who gave sort of like these personal poems and personal accounts of like trauma and things that they've been through. Going back to Lillian again, what should we do?
I know there is no one complete answer or anything, but I think that because of this dialogue that we're creating with TVM, that maybe we can inspire students to find their stories. And I mean, I know especially like through my own monologue within the play, I was completely inspired to start writing poetry again. I haven't picked up a pen in years, and it really just made me go, wow, I want to start writing again. I want to start telling my story, and that was lovely. I think our time of the Vagina Monologues has passed, and I think we can do a lot more with student monologues, and I think trauma, unfortunately, has touched all of us in some way, whether it's ourselves or our friends or our family. And I think that a lot of people have a lot of things to say about their own personal experiences that it can help and empower and inspire others without hurting others in the process. And I think that's definitely an avenue that we should go down, like go Ogle.
So thank you again for coming on, and I think that we've kind of hit our wrap-up point. So thank you very much, Lily, for coming on and giving us sort of this expose of TVM and giving us a perspective that's a little closer to the ground. Actually, somebody who was in there and had to experience what was actually going on. It's not just a bunch of third parties having an opinion. So thank you again for coming on to the Red Petrel. For our listeners, there will be a follow-up with a book actually recommended to us to sort of look over by Lily. It's This Bridge Called My Back, and we're going to have a court professor come on and talk about this book with us. So that'll be the third part of this segment. Thank you all for listening.
Thank
and
you
we'll
for
see you in the
having
next
me.
segment.